Hello and welcome in. I am MissKinghorn and we are back here in The Sims 4 and we are back with our medieval collection. It's been a while. Yeah, I kind of got a little bit bored and maybe frustrated. This build I tried to do ages ago. I actually built all of the exterior and I think I did a couple of the interiors and it just wasn't working. So in a fit of rage, I deleted it. As I do. And yeah, it was one of those where it was just a case of I can't deal with it. So I just got rid of it all. And then I took a bit of a break from that collection for a little while, and now I've decided we're going to finish it. So we have 2 more lots left. So we have this one and 1 more to do, and I have plans for that one. I'm going to take maybe a couple of weeks off and do some other builds, but then we're coming back to it. We're definitely going to finish this off. I can do 1 more build in this collection with this style. But yeah, this was a bit of a challenge, a bit of a fun one to do, but this is actually on a 30 by 20, so it's not a very big lot, but we get in 4 houses, essentially. I furnished 3 of them. 1 of them I have left empty. I've done all of the exterior work, I've done all of that, but I have left 1 empty, and you're going to sort of see as we come along and build that. But basically the buildings that I've done at the moment, they're the ones I furnish. I was going to do the last one, and then I looked at how much recording I had, and I decided that no, this video would be way too long. It's already kind of pushing it in terms of how much I would normally do in lengths, but I didn't want to cut out a build that I've already done the interior for. So I thought, let's just stop here and we'll kind of leave this one empty. So you can completely change this however you like. I've kind of done some of the interior work, so I've put in the beams and the battens and stuff like that, and stairs and things, and obviously all of the windows, but I haven't done interior walls or rooms or things like that. So you can kind of change it into whatever you really want in here, and it's kind of this section that I'm working on here. So the kind of little small diagonal piece down on the ground floor, I've kind of turned that into a bit of a community kind of space, so it has the letterboxes in and things like that that you would need to have for this to work as a for rent kind of build. Which is basically what it is, because we have, as I say, 3 houses. 1 of them is a 1-bedroom, there is a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom. So kind of lots of family kind of gameplay can go on in here. Now this is a Victorian, a medieval kind of build, so it's very old. I have snuck in a few modern bits and pieces here that wouldn't really work. There's a TV in one of them, there's a microwave, and a typewriter, which feels very old, but actually was not around at this time period. So I've kind of taken some leniencies here and there. But anyway, let's start talking about the exterior, because as you can see here, I am fighting the height of this build for this section in here. So we've kind of got this very pinky kind of sort of salmony limestone kind of, I think it's actually a concrete, but it looks like it's more in keeping with kind of the plaster that you would have at this time period. And then followed in with the kind of Tudor wooden slats kind of going along on that building. And then we have this red bricked kind of build over here with a turret. Now this turret, I actually forgot to put the dome roof on top. I've just kept it covered by the other roof and forgot to change the roofing. So I'm sorry about that. It is supposed to have a domed roof on the top, but yeah, anyway, it's kind of a fake little column in there that I don't really know what it was designed for. I had sort of lots of inspiration, and I was kind of pulling builds, and that's why there's kind of a collection of 3 of them, of these sort of buildings, and I've kind of put them together and kind of made a little bit of a village kind of feel in here, and I think this actually turns out pretty well. I like how it all works and how it all comes together in there for you. Obviously, with this one here being so tall, I did have difficulty with the camera, so you can sort of see I'm having to pull further away to change like roofing or windows and stuff. That's just because we'd keep jumping, and yeah, it's just one of those things where the game doesn't particularly like 3 or 4 story buildings, which is a bit of a weird one. But yeah, we are using lots of different windows because I wanted these to feel very different buildings, even though they are all together. So I kind of have used like life and death windows, we've used snowy escape windows, and we also use the stone ones from life and death. There's also a lot of werewolves pack in here as well, in terms of like rugs and then items and just things like that. Just lots of sort of different bits and pieces that we've got throughout of this that just kind of all come together in packs that I wouldn't necessarily think work, but they really, really do. And yes, how could I do an old build without Ivy? So yeah, we have this coming around over here as well. Just sort of tucking it all in around that sort of column. I think because the colour was so bright, it just made it need to have that extra kind of softening to it of the planting. Now, I only show you this section here of me doing this. I, ta-da, magically, go around and do it on all of the corners of this pink sort of building over here. I do actually change it because they are clipping, but I do that off camera because it was one of the things that was going to make this ridiculously long, so I decided to save some time for you guys and speed it all up a little bit in there. But yeah, we're putting on some battens just because obviously we have the overhang over here as well, and it just sort of needed an extra little bit of support as well. And now we have this big archway. This archway that was kind of leading between these 2 pink buildings wasn't really designed to be quite that big, but I couldn't get it any lower, so I've had to increase the size of the sort of archway wooden pieces, and they're actually on both sides of it. So I've tried to make it as good as I can, but we'll see. In there, it's not perfect, but you know, it is what it is in here. And now I've got lots of sort of barrels, and we actually use lots of sort of the half barrel planters around the place as well, because I thought they were really nice sort of touches. Maybe they're like repurposed and reused and things like that. One thing I did want is like a street market kind of in the middle, like this is a sort of a community hub. Maybe there's more homes around this with different families, but this is like the 3 or 4 sort of main buildings in the town centre. And you have this kind of semi-open place in the middle here, which I thought would be perfect for kind of having a bit more of a community kind of feel into here as well. So unfortunately, none of these look quite old, and yeah, I struggled a little bit with that. But we do also get the chicken coop in, because you would really find kind of animals just sort of running around the place, and I thought it would work out really well if there were some sort of animals like chickens, or the building for the sheep was too big, so that's why I decided to go for the chicken coop out the back here, and it's kind of tucked away that I feel like as a community they kind of look after them, not necessarily say it to any particular kind of person in there either. But we get lots of little plants coming through in here, which I think are pretty kind of old native kind of planting that we would kind of find in and around here anyway. So I really thought they would all kind of come together and make this into a nice little plant boxes and things like that. And then also the pink on pink worked quite well. And then just to give it that sort of touch of old, kind of not necessarily neglected, but kind of old and used kind of thing, I've put some grass around the places, and then some also piles of dirt as well, just because I wanted it to just feel old and feel kind of a little bit used and things like that in here. And now we're getting in some of these, I'm not actually quite sure what kind of plants these are, but they feel like conifers of some sort. I'm sure they have an actual proper name, but just some small ones of those dotted around the place because it just adds to that nice sort of flow in here. So what I have done, as I say, we've got 3 of these houses that I'll fill. So the first one is a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. That I kind of thought as maybe like an older kind of couple living there, and it's the smallest of them all, and which is the one we are going to start on right now. And you can see I'm putting in all of the kind of beams and battens and columns and things like that. And yeah, I actually really like how this all kind of comes together, and it makes it quite difficult to actually build when I have these kind of columns coming through and the beams, but it just adds so much more to the actual build and the realism of this kind of house in here, which I think I like to get into all of my builds, and I hope that kind of comes across with kind of my love of architecture and history and things like that. And it's definitely something I try to work on, maybe too much, because I see other builds where they're like, oh, here's a Victorian build, and it does not meet any of the Victorian kind of requirements, shall we say, or stylistics. But yeah, I try to bring in as much sort of realism and kind of truthfulness, I guess you can say, into my builds as much as possible. Whether that is a good thing or not, I do not know. But anyway, now we're working on cluttering up this sort of kitchen in here. Now this is quite small. As I say, this was the smallest of the 3 buildings that we furnished, and the kitchen, as per usual, is quite small in that regard. So we've kind of used these shelves from Enchanted by Nature, these kind of wooden kind of boards, and they actually work in here really, really well for this sort of open shelving. And we've just kind of got some little knickknacks, so some plates, some cups, some like preserved bits and pieces, and some jars and things like that, which I thought worked really, really well for what I wanted in here. And then a few kitchen cupboards above the cooker and things like that as well. And then we've actually used the sink from the laundry day. Now, I don't think I used too much from that pack. I certainly don't use obviously laundry from it, but it was the kind of closest sink I could really get. They didn't really have internal plumbing, which again is one of the things that I'm kind of like umming and ahhing about with this build. They do have fully functioning bathrooms, each of the builds that I furnished. So there is a shower, there is baths, there is toilets, there is also an outhouse, which is a lot more realistic than what an indoor bathroom would be. But I had to make some changes here and there and to make these kind of functional for you. So yeah, it was one of those choices I had to make in there, whether it's sort of playability in game compared to kind of realism in things like this. And this is where I get in the typewriter in here, as I thought this was for a kind of an older kind of couple. And you can also see the TV here too. Lighting, I've got my spotlights in just so that we can sort of see, but I do actually change those all out, and we kind of go for candles on the wall, and then these kind of little, they're like oil lamps, I guess, which probably would be around about that sort of time in here. And there's also, we do get some ceiling lights, but again I feel like they are kind of more oil lamps than anything else into here. And yeah, just sort of some normal kind of clutter coming through, some books, some boxes on the floor, some cardboard boxes here and there, and just some sort of normal kind of junk, I guess you can probably say, into here as we do use a lot of candles. This is probably a huge fire risk. But at the time, that's kind of all they had. So it was one of those catch-22s. Normally, I don't tend to put so many candles in a build, but yeah, it's something I had to sort of go for in here. And then we got this bookcase over there. I'm not entirely sure you're going to be able to access that. I feel like it's a very kind of tight kind of corner popped in over there, but as you can see, we are now changing it out for some of these lights in here. Now we do actually have this on a medium wall height, so I do manage to get in some quite long lights in certain places, which as you can see is probably going to cut off that sort of corner off even more. But now we're jumping up into the upstairs in here, so this is where the bathroom comes in, and we actually place it up on another platform because I didn't want it to flood into the sort of bedroom, but I didn't want to put doorways in here, so we've actually gone for a kind of an open kind of beam coming through here. There's not so many beams upstairs as there are downstairs, but there are that one in there, and it also tucks and fills in the sort of square or slightly rectangle kind of column that we've got coming up through the house. So the interior and exterior actually kind of work, and that's something I've tried to do in this to kind of make it feel like it works a little bit more into there. And now this, I actually struggled, and I think this is probably what I struggled with when I first did this build, is how many items we had that kind of work. Now we do have life and death, which is great, and there is actually quite a lot of that pack in here, but I actually use quite a lot of horse ranch, and it's weird because I was like, that does not work, but yet it actually kind of works quite well with it. So like this whole bedroom set here is from horse ranch. We've got some of the new plants and the different pots. You can see I actually tried to do it in a vase, but we didn't have any flowers to place in there, so I ended up having to change the plant out. And then we've just got in some shoes, some more boxes and things like that. What I would presume would be kind of normal clutter for this kind of period in time in here, and also a tissue box and some sort of cologne kind of perfume bottles in there as well. And now trying to find some artwork that kind of fits. We went for these two on here, which I think are actually from Discover University, but they actually work really, really nicely in there. And I didn't say the rugs from Werewolves worked perfectly for this build. Now this is the only bathroom I show you in here, but as I say, there is one in this build, there is one in the 2-bed, and then there is actually 2 in the 3-bed. How I managed to get a 6-bedroom into this build with a whole building to spare, I really don't know. I feel like you could probably get 2, possibly 3 into the other building as well, like bedrooms in there, with maybe like another bathroom. So there is quite a lot of space in there, but yeah, this was actually quite a fun kind of challenging kind of build to do, where I've played around with a few different pieces, and yeah, I actually really enjoyed how this all comes together. But we also use a big mirror there kind of covering the wallpaper. Now the curtains you saw me place above the bed in here, these are the only curtains I place in the entire build. Why? Because I forget completely about them until I have actually saved this to my library. So I think I mentioned this the other week. What I tend to do is I save it to my library, and then I come in and play test, and I then sort of change, like if I have to change a few things, then I kind of go back in and fix all of that. But with this I didn't need to really kind of play test too much. So, and it kind of worked, so I was kind of happy with how all of that worked. What I did do is I had to change it from being a rental to being a family home to playtest it, because I wasn't like going to create all the families to put in there and stuff like that. So I decided to kind of change out the way I kind of did it and things like that, which naturally then made it 20 times harder for myself. Anyway, this is now the 3-bedroom one in here. So as you can see up here, we have a kind of big hallway, and then 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. along that sort of centre line in there. And then what we do is have the kind of kitchen dining room on the ground floor, then the sort of living room kind of seating area kind of come workshop room on the second floor, and then on the top is where the kind of bedrooms are, with also like another little sort of study area into there as well. So this is the biggest of the three, and I've got to be honest, I was tempted to just furnish these two, and that was originally what I was going to set out to do, but I couldn't help myself, so I made my life a little bit more difficult and decided to kind of do all three, and then I stopped there. So as you can see, the kitchen is pretty similar. This one is slightly bigger just simply because we have a little bit more space in here, and using the new backsplash as well with the kind of bugs on it, I thought that was a nice little touch in there, because we don't have different wallpaper. So the wallpaper on the outside is pretty much the wallpaper we have on the interior of all of these. I don't change any of it. So, which is very in keeping, because you wouldn't have like a difference between your interior and exterior, like you would have it the same. So that's kind of what I tried to do. And then I finally found a use for this new dining table. This is one of the items that we got from the latest sort of rewards event. I didn't know where I was ever going to use it, and this actually works in here really well. It kind of fills in that sort of space, and I've kind of used it more as like an island piece. So although we have 6-seater or chairs around it, it actually kind of fits in there really, really nicely as an island where they would maybe chop up their food, like chop the vegetables, like deal with any of the meat or anything like that, and then they would turn around and put it on the cooker and things like that, or what would probably originally be a fireplace in there as well. Now, we don't actually have any fireplaces in this build. I purposely didn't want to bring those in. I felt like they, exterior wise, they just didn't fit, so I didn't even contemplate putting them in on the interior. Essentially, but I just didn't bother with any of those in here. But now we're finished over the downstairs, we're going to jump up in here to the living room. Now this looks really small. It's actually quite big. You can sort of see here, I'm fitting in a 3-seater sofa and 2 armchairs, and I still have loads of space left. Now I wanted to keep kind of the stairs onto one side, and they do kind of like come back up on each other, and I do that in quite a few builds because you kind of have that sort of staircase column along one wall. So I wanted kind of access to all of that as well. So we've kind of smooshed the kind of living room into this sort of corner over here, but it does give me quite a lot of excess space, and I struggle for a little while in here, and I do actually pause the recording and kind of have a slight play around and change how I kind of wanted to do things, and you'll sort of see that slightly as we go through this room. So because we had the market stalls outside, what I kind of wanted to do is bring in some kind of skills that like these people would have. Now, the people that are going to go in here are not your royalty, they're not your rich kind of people, they're not those that have proper jobs that like are paying well. They're kind of like your traders, they're your kind of individual people, local people who work in this sort of community. So what I was kind of thinking is maybe like an artist who maybe like sells their paintings out in the village, sort of in the local area. Maybe they go to like different shows, maybe because they have such a big house, I guess, in terms of this sort of area here, they've got the biggest one. Maybe they do some like portrait work of other people and things like that, that they kind of go out of their home to the other people's houses to kind of do. So they're somewhat well off, but not castle or like manor kind of rich. I hope that kind of, you understand what I mean when I sort of say that. But we have jumped up onto the top floor up here, which we have quite an open big space, and I didn't really know what to do with it. So in the end we've got in a couple of bookcases, we've got some more sort of seating, and we've kind of turned it into a bit more of a sort of study area up there. As well, I kind of figured that maybe you could have like some play equipment, like sort of kids things up here. We do manage to kind of contain that into the kids' rooms, but I feel like they might take it out a little bit and kind of have the run of the upstairs, that kind of thing, whereas downstairs is more maybe if you have guests coming over, that sort of thing, and that rather than the bedrooms all being up here in there. But this is the main bedroom, so this kind of takes part of the kind of turret and also part of the sort of normal build in here, and this is where we use the life and death bed. I love this bed. It didn't feel like it fitted into the other build, but this one I think actually works in here quite nicely. And again, with sort of those lights that I've used, so we've got the candles, we've got the other lighting, sort of gas lights that we've used in the other build as well. I did try to keep a lot of it all the sort of same in places. Now you can see here I did have a little bit of difficulty because we are up so high, a lot of things are jumping, and it proved a little bit challenging, but we got there in the end, and we got some more maybe expensive kind of paintings and portraits up here, and then a nice little vanity section on this side in here. I really want a kind of a Sims Medieval or a Royal kind of expansion pack. I know we've got the Castle Estates kit, and that's great for exterior work. It still doesn't have everything that I would really need for a castle, I've got to be fair. But, and go back and have a look at my other videos of sort of from when that kit came out, and you'll sort of see my criticism of that pack. But I feel there are so much we are missing from that kind of era in there for historic homes and things like that. I think something like that would be perfect for this game. It's one of those kind of packs that I'm really looking forward to, and I really hope we get, but I also know that we probably won't get, but it's something that I really want. Let's put it that way into here. But now we're working on the toddler room, and we're nearly actually done with this room. I used a lot of the storybook, well, I used pretty much everything from the storybook kit in there. It just fits the theme, and by this point I was sort of struggling to kind of come up with furniture choices for a lot of this, because I didn't necessarily have all of, like, there was bits and pieces that I didn't want to use because they were like too modern, they were painted woods, and it was just kind of feeling a little bit samey, kind of going over and over again. So I've had to kind of change things around a little bit, and it proved quite difficult. I feel like smaller builds in this sort of style are probably better when we don't have too many things from that in there. But this is for a sort of child in there. We do have a few little toys and bits and pieces out for them. We do also get the I think we get a toy box in here as well. And now this is the last build, so I'm jumping over. This is the red bricked one at the back, and then we are going to do another kitchen dining room downstairs. This does have a downstairs bathroom, you can see that. I don't show you that on camera, but it is all sort of furnished for you when you download this build, which you can do right now. It is available on the gallery as we speak in here. But yeah, this one I kind of wanted a bit of a bigger kind of kitchen for, so this is the 2-bedroom one in here, and it's again of a 3-story build. So whereas we managed to condense a kitchen, dining room and a living room and kind of a bit of a study into the first one, this one we just have the dining room and the kitchen down here and a bathroom, whereas the other ones just have a kitchen and dining room. But yeah, I struggled to get that in, as you can see, because we're all on platforms as well. It kind of wants to clip it down. But anyway, each of the kitchens has at least one worktop that is completely empty, so you'll have no clipping or anything like that if you use that particular sort of cabinet. But also the ones where there are items on, they're not technically on the cabinets, so they can still obviously use them. It's just that there might be a little bit of clipping here and there. But as this was going to be a smaller family build, I didn't want to do too much of a big kind of kitchen or big dining table in here. So we've kind of gone for this small little one with 3 chairs in there for a nice little family of 3 that we've got going in. Now, I did place a potty in the in the toddler's bedroom. There isn't any other potties throughout this build, or saying that there is a bath in that apartment or house, so they can use that, but there's no high chair or anything like that for them. And I particularly did that because they wouldn't really have them for this sort of time period, so the ones we have in game aren't quite what I would use in there. But then saying that, we do have a microwave in this build that we're working on here, and refrigerators and things like that. But as I said earlier, we kind of had to take some items at face value, and what I chose and what I didn't choose to use differ from different packs, and what I really wanted the aesthetic to look like from each of the 3 different builds. Because I feel like although they are the same, they're all in the same build, they're all designed to look the same, they each have their own different personality, and they're kind of slightly different depending on who I imagine or envision actually moving into this sort of each of these builds in here. Obviously you can come in and completely gut all of these and change them out to whatever you want, and make them completely modern if you really wanted to. It wouldn't really work with the exterior, but you know, that's absolutely fine into there. Now, what I actually wanted here, I've placed the 2 armchairs at like right angles to the coffee table, which have the chessboard on it. Now, we do actually get a proper big chess set here, but I would kind of envision that you don't have a full chess table, like you have like a tabletop version, and I feel like that's something we really need in game, is just one like that where you can put armchairs, you can sit down at different tables, have it on a dining table, or put it on a shelf and pull it out when you need it, or in your inventory or something like that. That is something I think we desperately kind of need, a working version of that rather than just a clutter piece. But for this, I also again thought that we needed some sort of skilled trader in here that would then sell the merchandise. So we went for jewellery making because it kind of fits in with the colour theme, the style of what we're working on in here as well. So I went through and we've pulled out lots of sort of jewellery pieces in here. So we have some necklaces on sort of one shelf, and then we have some like earrings and rings and bracelets and things like that over here as well, just to kind of fit out all of this. So I kind of, again, like what I said with the painter, that they would maybe go to shows or exhibitions, or maybe they would do like custom work for maybe somebody of some sort of importance, that kind of thing in there, just to kind of finance the fact that they're living in somewhat of a nice house. I've got to be honest, this again, it doesn't feel very poor housing, but it doesn't feel very expensive housing. They're not kind of like shanty sort of townhouses, that kind of thing. I feel like that might be something I might like to do, but again, I don't feel like we've got the items for it, so maybe in the future, possibly if we get new items and things like that. But this is now up into the main bedroom for this build. As I said, this is a 2-bedroom, so it's got a double bed and then also a single kids room in there as well. And for this one, we don't have any beams up here, there just really wasn't any room for any. And then we've also got in some of the more lighting. We've gone for some softer sort of candles in there that I feel like they would just go around and light. You did all notice that I thought about pulling out the candle making. It just didn't look old enough, it looked quite modern. I also used the pottery, didn't really work either, so that's why we went with the jewellery making. But we are coming up to the end of this build. If you have enjoyed it, then please give it a big thumbs up, and you can subscribe to my channel. You would mean so very much to me. You can also download this build right now from the Sims 4 gallery, and you can find me on pretty much all social medias. My link tree is down in the description, so make sure to check that out, and then you'll never miss a post, a build, or anything like that in the future. But yeah, I didn't necessarily know what kind of gender I wanted for this kid's bedroom. I kind of kept it a little bit neutral. We have got the doll's house, which I actually think is one from Enchanted by Nature, but also kind of a nice soft blue kind of bedding in there as well, and then just some plants. But that is it for this. I will leave you with the screenshots, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. But until then, alright, bye everyone!